I'm Ashley Michaels, and this is Colorado Point of View. Busy week as lawmakers here in Colorado get ready to head back to the state capitol for a special session. They're dealing with a massive budget hole, and now we're learning some local governments may also miss out on money they were expecting. Back in May, the mayors of 6 metro area cities sued the state after Governor Jared Polis threatened to withhold grant money from local governments that don't follow a new affordable housing law. That law changes zoning, land use, and parking to make it easier for developers to build denser housing projects. We had 2 of those mayors, a Democrat and a Republican, here on Colorado Point of View. Back at that time, they both argued the mandate violates their city's home rule protections. Well, this week, the governor laid out which grants are at stake, and it adds up to about $280 million. In his executive order, Polis wrote, especially at a time of economic uncertainty and federal policies negatively impacting state revenue, it's important to ensure that state funds are spent on local projects that lower the cost of living for Coloradans, including housing and transportation costs. Let's bring on our analysts to talk more about it. On the Democratic side, we have senior presidential and gubernatorial advisor Andy Boyan. And on the Republican side, we have the president of Advance Colorado, Michael Fields. Good to see you both. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Andy, I'll start with you on this one. Okay, so you have the state withholding money from cities over a policy. We've seen the same thing at the federal level, withholding money from Colorado over policies. Is this hypocritical of Governor Polis?
Well, first, welcome back, Ashley. Glad to see you back in the chair. I would say no. And the fundamental reason is the basis by which he is deciding on this. And that is, we can talk about the president withholding funds from the NIH. He wants to decline the annual budget by 44%. That's obviously our nation's top place for the study of cancer research and the COVID vaccine, et cetera. So it makes no sense. Whereas in Polis's case here with the governor, we are short, as you said, nearly $1 billion. We don't know where that money's going to come from. So we have to figure this out. We got a C- from the National Transportation Safety Board on our infrastructure in Colorado. So we obviously have infrastructure issues. We have a lot of issues to fix. And what the governor's saying is, let's prioritize those counties which we need the money to go the furthest and the most. And so it makes logical sense. Whereas in the Trump case, for example, in the president's case, he's just withholding willy-nilly and getting people like Elon Musk to discount things that he has no idea about, and obviously has had serious repercussions where they've had to rehire people back, at a moment's notice, and had some serious headwinds when it comes to that. So the differences are stark, and the reason for such are stark. And so Governor Polis has a really strong incentive for doing this the right way, whereas the Trump administration, particularly the president, is interested in bad-mouthing, he's interested in retribution, and he's interested in causing people pain for no apparent reason.
Michael, I want to hear from you on this. Do you see this as hypocrisy from Polis?
Yeah, I think that it is, and I think there are very similar things. You have Polis complaining about what's happening at the federal level. You have Attorney General Phil Weiser doing lawsuits about this kind of stuff at the federal level, and then Polis comes in and uses executive orders to take money away. I think that it makes more sense that if the grants are tied to that issue, sure, you can have some back and forth on it. But when you're taking it from transportation or energy and it's housing, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so I do think that there is some validity to this home rule lawsuit that, as you mentioned, the mayors of certain towns are engaging in going after Polis about that. I do think, this is a legacy issue for him. If you think 2 sessions ago, he had a bill that he wanted to get passed that got shot down in the legislature. They had to water it down. Now using these kinds of both carrots and stick approaches. I think this is one that Polis sees. This is a legacy issue. I'm going to do everything I can to get this done. But I think, it is hypocritical when you're making, looking at the federal government and saying, you shouldn't be doing this, but I can do this as governor here.
Now, just a real quick question for both of you. You talk about these legacy issues. Polis is getting into his last year as governor. Do you think we're going to start to see more of these, I guess you could call them bold moves from the governor?
I think on specific issues. This is one of them where he has said, I want to go do, kindergarten and preschool. And housing is one of those issues that I think he is going to do that on. But he is in lame duck territory. You have the legislature pushing back against him more. You've seen that happen with some of the, the disagreements where he vetoed their bills and this kind of back and forth there. But I also think that he's thinking about running for president. And that changes even the last few months. You've seen it on social media where he's so much more focused on federal issues too. So I think multiple things are going on during his last, year and a half here as governor.
Landy, I want to give you a chance to weigh in. Do you think we're going to start to see more of these kind of bold moves from him?
I agree with Michael. I think on certain issues you will. I actually don't think he's going to run for president. And I advise particularly governors, pretty regularly. And I can say on Polis' side, I think he's interested in finishing strong, and I think he's interested in making sure and ensuring that what he said he'd do, particularly for a second term, he will finish. I think that's where he's more interested. I think he's less worried about legacy, less worried about ideology and about optics, and more about getting things done. I think if you ask Republicans and Democrats if they like the governor, there's probably equal amounts that probably like and don't like the governor, which I think means he's done a good job. So I think there's a lot there for Polis to really be proud of. And I think in the last year, he's going to do his best to fulfill what he said he would and worry less about ideology and not worry about his presidential run. I don't think that's happening.
Let's look ahead here just a little bit. Special session scheduled for next week. Now, we talked in depth with a couple of members of the Joint Budget Committee last week, but we haven't had a chance to talk to you guys about it. So I want you to weigh in. What are you watching for? What do you hope happens? Andy, I'll start with you on this one.
Sure. Well, I think both, first of all, Barb Kirkmeyer and Jeff Bridges did a fantastic job, in my opinion, of laying out the differences between the two parties and where the priorities are and what's going to happen. Both obviously said there's no cuts to K-12, no cuts to Medicaid. They both committed to that. They obviously have a very difficult job. And it really doesn't matter which party this is about. This has to do with, where the priorities are and where the priorities are for the state. And we saw in the show last week, they work well together. They talk well together. They obviously agree on a lot, and they have a lot of respect for each other. I would like to see particularly more interest in public safety. I want to see numbers on public safety, particularly the fact that we're short in DPD. We're short some officers, hundreds of officers at this point. I'd like to see some more money put there. I'd also like to see some more opportunity for education to be put higher up on the list. And also, I think, this idea about Republicans and gun control legislation ought to be reconciled, because I think we're spending a lot of time and money on gun control. We keep having school shootings. We keep having evidence that we need help there. And yet Republicans keep pushing back, commenting on free speech and freedom to carry a gun in the Second Amendment. But the problem with it is that we're spending a lot of time, a lot of money on it. So end of the day, I think the special session we're going to eke out a way to get this figured out by two smart people in the Joint Budget Committee and the legislature in general. But I would like to see those solutions brought to bear here quickly.
Michael, what are you going to be watching for?
Yeah, so I think actually in that interview last week with them, the big news that came out of it was that Jeff Bridges, basically said that they're going to be raising revenue during this special session. And that's on top of the fact that they're already going to raise taxes on overtime going into next year when there was the cut at the federal level on overtime and tips. And so, you think about Tabor puts a lot of protections in place for them not to be able to do this. I think you're not only going to have a fight during special session, but also a legal fight afterwards, saying, can you go and raise taxes, revenue, without asking voters during this year? Tabor says you can't, and so I think you're going to see this in the courts. I do think that broader discussion, that Republicans want to have the discussion about the budget and say, how did you have a $3.6 billion surplus a few years ago, and now we have a deficit, knowing that this special session deficit really is just coming from tax cuts that are going back into people's pockets that are very popular on the federal and state level. But the whole overall conversation, we have a $44 billion budget. We're talking about 3% cuts that we have to make during special session. The budget's still going to be bigger than it was last year. And so, the question really has to do with, and this is a Denver question too, why is revenue down? Why are we getting less money in? And that's because of the policies that Democrats have passed. So I think the more we can talk about this budget discussion during special session, the better it's going to be for Republicans heading into next year's election, because that's an issue that Coloradans agree with them on.
Now, real quick on this, but it kind of feels like deja vu. We've had 3 years where we've had 3 special sessions. What does that say to you that we keep heading back into special session year after year?
Well, I think, it says that legislators must like being there. I think Polis isn't afraid to call them. Obviously, last year I was supportive because we were cutting property taxes during that special session. But it just seems like the work isn't getting done all the way through during session. Obviously, this is a little bit different because of the budget situation. So, there have been a lot recently. And, I don't think legislators are thrilled to have to come back during summer. And hopefully this doesn't happen every single year.
Andy, I'll give you the closing word on this one.
I just think this has to do largely with this session, particularly has to do largely with the fact that the federal government can't get their stuff straight. And I think the president has done enormous damage to states right now. And most states are going to be called back into special session. I mean, we're watching things happening around the country right now with Texas and California and other states around the nation. I think there's a lot of trust and faith in state legislators on both sides of the aisle. But I think Democrats have done a good job to steward us through this totally chaotic first 140 days of the Trump presidency. And I think there's more damage to come from the Trump White House. And I think what we're going to do is try to backstop some of that in this session as well.
All right. Well, we'll have to see what comes out of the special session. I'm sure we'll be talking about it in the next couple of weeks. Stay right there. We'll be right back after the break with more analysis on what's happening in Washington this week. Welcome back. In a rare move, President Trump has seized control of the police department in Washington, D.C., citing issues with crime and safety. The National Guard has also been brought in. Soldiers are lining the streets in the National Mall. The president has the power to federalize the capital city's police department for 30 days. This week, he said he may declare a national emergency as well in order to extend that without needing approval from Congress. He also said this.
What we want to do is make Washington, D.C., the greatest, most beautiful, safest capital anywhere in the world. And that's going to happen. When you look at some of the buildings here, it's so magnificent and everything's good, but it's just dirty and not properly maintained. It's not taken care of. Potholes in the roads. All of it's going to happen very quickly. We're going to seek a relatively small amount of money for fix-up.
Let's bring our analyst back in. First, I just want to get your thoughts on what's happening with the president and D.C. right now. Michael, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think you do have a responsibility as the federal government when that's where your capital is. It is a city that is literally run by Congress. Obviously, some time ago, they have this limited home rule autonomy, but you can take it back over. So I think you look at it is allowed under law to do what he's talking about. It is only planned for 30 days for right now. It could get extended. But I do think these are unique circumstances. They're trying to deal with crime, cleaning up the area. The crime is still a problem in D.C. and across the country. It's down from a couple years ago, but not down from pre-pandemic. And so I do think anybody who goes to D.C. Would say we need to do a better job, and having federal government help in a city that is run by the federal government, I think makes a lot of sense.
Andy, I want to hear from you on this and what's happening in D.C. right now.
This is idiotic. 100% idiotic for two fundamental reasons. One, crime's down 26% since last year. It's down 14% since COVID. Murder's down 44%. Sexual assaults are down 28%. There's no reason to federalize Washington, D.C. right now. This is political theater. This is Trump thumping his chest. And in the most ridiculous clip we just had right there, where he said there are potholes and things need to be maintained, he's calling the National Guard in. I mean, this guy is he's a used car salesman. He's trying to figure out how to stay on TV and how to stay relevant. And the reality is, I'm sorry, but this is very hard for me to sit here and even think about the reality of nationalizing our national mall in Washington, D.C. when crime is still down, and it's not in other parts of the country. There's crime up in Chicago right now, and Michael's from Chicago. I mean, he should care about his home city. There's crime up in Los Angeles. I mean, I understood why the federal troops were there for a short time. They're probably too long, but in Washington, D.C. makes no sense. Also, we have a mayor in Washington, D.C. It's not run by Congress. It's run by the mayor, and the mayor has the D.C. Police Department, and it makes no sense to have federal troops invading her city when in fact she has control of it and was not told about it previously. So this is a guy he's a game show host, car dealer that just wants political theater, and it's costing time and money. You don't call the National Guard out to fix potholes.
You bring up some of those other cities, and the president brought up some of those other cities too, specifically Democratic-run cities, saying they may be next after he, quote unquote, cleans up D.C. Obviously, he's been critical of Denver before. He did not specifically name Denver, but could you see something like that happening here?
Not in Denver. Not a chance. No, I mean, there are so many. I mean, the guy's crazy, but I don't think that he's going to go into cities that are obviously run very well. And if he wants to target democratically controlled cities, which is really ludicrous, what he should be doing is spending money on those that he's taking food out of kids' mouths for Medicaid and Medicare and worried more about that. But obviously he's not. He wants optics. And I find it hard to believe that Michael's going to defend him here.
Michael, what do you have to say on that?
No, I don't think so. And I think because the legal footing is different, right? That these cities, these states have to deal with stuff largely on their own. I do think that, Andy brought up the places where crime's going up. He talked about LA and Chicago. A lot of his party has been pushing defund the police for a long period of time in those areas. areas. Here in Colorado, we passed a ballot measure last year to give cops more money, which was a good thing. So I think this is something that has to be tackled at the local level. I don't see the federal government getting involved like they are in D.C.
All right, let's talk about something else. So the president is also holding a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska this week. Now, that will have already happened by the time our viewers watch this show. But Trump said this week that if Russia doesn't end the war in Ukraine, there will be, quote, very serious consequences. So I want to hear from both of you. Michael, we'll start with you. What is at stake politically with Trump in this meeting, and what's at stake for the world with this meeting?
I think the stakes are pretty high, given the fact that, one of the things Trump ran on was trying to end this war between Russia and Ukraine. I think it will end at some point. Is that right now? I hope so, but it might not be the case. And I think the biggest sticking point has been the sticking point from the start, which is kind of this territorial discussion, right? Like if Russia right now is 18% of Ukraine, Ukraine doesn't want to give up any of their land. Like if they're going to stop this war, they want all their land back, and Russia's going to want something, in return. They're going to want it. So I think there's this ceasefire they're trying to get to negotiate. But I think, I'm not convinced that this is going to turn out, that everything, works out right now. I think starting those discussions, starting to continue them is important. And I don't think this meeting is predetermined. Sometimes you have ones, hey, let's come in, do a press conference, everything's already figured out. I actually think this meeting is going to be, hey, how do we get this war to stop? What does it look like? Can we make a deal in order to do that? And I just don't know if that's going to be happening right now. But I do think the long-term stakes are high because everybody wants this war to end. It's gone on too long.
Andy, what's at stake here from your viewpoint?
Well, there is a lot at stake here, and I think a human life is the first thing at stake. And I think I feel bad for both sides, but I feel bad for the Ukrainian people that are caught in the middle of this fight. And it makes no sense. I think Russia's a bully. I think they're the aggressor here. I think he's going to get nowhere with Vladimir Putin. I think Putin said here this morning, which Thursday morning, he said, that Trump is hyping this meeting up too much. So I think Trump's going to be unsuccessful. He ran on this saying he's going to solve this war in one day. He can't get anything done in one day. So it's a very difficult, in my opinion, hypocritical thing to say, I'm going to go to Alaska and try to get this done. And there's no chance that he's going to get this done in Alaska. And that's unfortunate because the reality is that Ukraine is a free and sovereign nation. And for them to give up territory to Russia to stop the war seems unfair and unrealistic. And also it's anti-foreign policy for us to want to do that. And I hope this president stands up for the United States. I doubt he will.
Again, we'll have to see what comes of it. Let's bring the conversation back to Colorado. So the former chair of El Paso County Republicans, this week he announced he's going to leave the party. Kent Schneider is his name, and he says that party no longer reflects his values, so he's joining the Unity Party instead. Now, we have seen this a few times. We've had the conversation about third parties. Elon Musk recently left the GOP. Karine Jean-Pierre left the Democratic Party. My question for you guys, is this a new phenomenon, and what can major parties learn from people stepping away? Andy?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I'm not sure this is a phenomenon because it's been happening for a while now. I mean, I think it happened really in the late 80s and early 90s. You watched the Ross Perot presidential effort that was significant with his own money and putting money into his race. I also think that people are less interested in ideology and less interested in labels. And so, what I think about this guy, Mr. Snyder, is he left the Republican Party because he said it's about political ideology and not political values anymore. And he said, the Republican Party is made up of political theater. He said conspiracy theories attacking vulnerable communities. So I think he has the right pulse on where the Republican Party is, where it's going. I'm glad he left. But I also think in Colorado, you see disarray in the Colorado Republican Party beyond measure. And I think it doesn't reflect the Colorado Republicans in general. I know a lot of good, strong Colorado Republicans that hold conservative values that are strong and that make sense for Colorado. But I think the Colorado Republican Party particularly has left some of those people behind, including Mr. Snyder. And now I think we're going to see more people leave the Republican Party, which only spells, a third party run at some point in the country for a serious presidential contender, but it also gives us opportunity to look at those that actually follow the news and listen to it, to worry less about labels and less about ideology, more about what do I care about as a conservative or a liberal, and then how is that reflected in one of these two parties? If it's not, I need to leave. And that's what Mr. Snyder did.
All right, Michael, I'll give you the last minute on this one. I mean, what can parties learn from all of this?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Andy was, making this all about the Republican Party only when the Democratic Party nationally is at negative 30 points, right? It's 30 points underwater. The unfortunate thing is the GOP is 12 points underwater too. So you have two political parties that are underwater. This is why you've seen so many people move to become unaffiliated. In Colorado, we're almost at 50% of the population is unaffiliated. I do think that people dislike partisanship. They want to actually fix problems. And I think that's where the parties have to look at it. It's like, what are we doing about cost of living, about safety, stuff that really matters to people? How do we find candidates that we can run that can relate to people, that people identify with in some way? And then how do we inspire people? Right? And I hope that happens on both parties, that we get people more involved, that people want to volunteer, they want to run for office. I think, the negativity that we see makes people not want to do those things. And so what I would say is the parties need to focus on issues, focus on running the right people, and focus on inspiring the next generation, because that's, all we have in Colorado, all we have in the nation is the next people coming up. And so focusing on young people is important.
All right. Thank you both for your conversation, as always. After the break, we've got an update to immigration facilities here in Colorado. We're getting new details about what's happening inside the one in Aurora and learning about a new one set to open later this year. We're learning a new immigration detention facility will open by the end of the year in Hudson, which is northeast of Denver. ICE says it needs more room because it's arresting more people. Meanwhile, some of Colorado's congressional members toured the ICE facility in Aurora this week. Here's political reporter Gabrielle Franklin.
Democratic U.S. House members from Colorado visited this ICE facility today, and they say they left the building with more questions than answers.
And when I walked through the facility, it felt like a prison.
Colorado Democratic congressional members say the GO ICE facility in Aurora has changed since the last time they went inside it.
After my 10th visit, this has been the most difficult visit in terms of getting information, getting answers out of the facility, out of the employees, and being obstructed from conducting full oversight that I've had in over 6 years.
They say unlike unannounced visits in years past, they had to give advance notice before coming in. Lawmakers saying they didn't feel they were able to get a full depiction of what is really happening behind those walls.
It's a constitutional duty of Congress to do oversight of facilities like this. And there's nothing in the law that says that members of Congress should have to give previous notice. The reason we gave previous notice, we wanted to see what the heck was in there. But because we were forced to give 7 days notice before we went, it was very convenient, a lot of the things we saw.
Members say detainees were separated by criminal levels, falling under medium and high risk. They also said phone calls cost detainees 15 cents a minute per each call, raising concerns in a state where calls for state prisoners are free. Members say they're worried facility staffers cleaned up the area before they could visit, adding to their concerns that they're already taking action over.
The administration is violating federal law with respect to its unlawful policies regarding unannounced visits to detention facilities, as well as their policies regarding visits to field offices, which is why we're suing the Trump administration in a court of law.
Well, that does it for us this week. Thanks for joining in on the conversation. We'll see you next week.